Oh, sorry about that. So you want 2.5 teaspoons of salt. So you find teaspoon on there. 1, 2, and then you want to find half a teaspoon. There's a fourth, right there, half a teaspoon. Incorporate your salt, and then there you go with that. Now what we need to do is mix in flour. So what you want is about 3¼ cups flour. So I've got it all set out here. Again, it's mise en place, everything in its place. So big helping of this. 1. 2. 3. And 1/4. Alright, so we've got everything added that we need to add. Now what we need to do is mix this together, because you want to incorporate all these flavors together. And get a nice dough going. Now it's starting to look good. It is going to use your muscles a little bit. But the cool thing is I can see the herbs that are actually getting mixed in. And they look very refreshing. And you want to try to add in as much as you can. Really kind of get it into a ball. And then, it starts to look like, a nice dough, which is what we want. And then the herbs are mixing in very nicely, which I like to see. Alright, this is pretty well incorporated, which is what we want to have it be together. But what's going to happen is that the warm water is going to react with the yeast, and this will rise. And it takes about 2 hours to rise. So I'll come back in about 2 hours. So this looks good. Not quite as smooth as I would like it to be, but what are you going to do? Like I said, it's my first time doing this process entirely by myself. Melanie's a pro. I'm not much of a pro when it comes to this. But now what we want to do, now that we have our dough, we want to take some cling wrap, and we're going to let this, and then we're going to cover this. And cling wrap's always fun. Because it likes to bunch together. But you can unbunch it. There's our first piece. And we're going to set that over the top of it, and then I'm going to need one more piece just to make sure it's fully covered. Here's our second piece, which was much kinder than the first one. And then we're going to let this sit. So what I'll do now is on the oven here, I'm going to set an alarm or timer for 2 hours. And then this way I know everything's covered, ready to go. And this is going to rise. It's going to get a lot bigger because the yeast is activating as we speak, and things will get bigger much faster. Now what I want to do is I want to kind of clean up my area a little bit because the main process is done. What we have left is to bake. But one thing that we do need to do is I have cornmeal here, and you want to put some parchment paper down. And once you put the parchment paper down, you want to sprinkle it with a little bit of the cornmeal. So the minute this is done and ready to go, and man, it's kind of crazy. You can already see it reacting with everything and getting bigger already. But once you put the cornmeal down, what that's going to do is then it's just ready to go right into here, which is a Dutch oven. And then that will go into the oven and we'll bake it. But first, we need to put down what we need to put down. And then once I turn the video off, I am going to clean up my tiny mess here. Because, again, clean as you go. It makes it easier. Now, Melanie showed me a trick. It's a good trick. But the trick is this. So you have parchment paper, which you need to put down because that will be safe in the Dutch oven at any degree, really. So that's kind of where you want to go with it. So parchment paper is very important. But the way it comes out, it folds up immediately. So you want to kind of turn it upside down once you have the right length. And then that looks pretty good. And we're going to put it down here, but it still wants to bunch up. So what Melanie showed me was you just bend in the corners. And then it kind of creates like a little barrier as well for when you put on the cornmeal. And this way it won't bunch up again. Not as much. And there you go. We got ourselves something. Now it's going to stay, which is perfect because what we're going to do is eventually transfer this into the Dutch oven and put it in the oven once this is done for its 2 hours. Then what we want to do, just to be set and ready to go, is take some cornmeal. I'm just going to take some and just sprinkle it around the middle of the parchment paper because this is where the dough is going to sit. And it adds flavor, but also it keeps it from sticking, which is what you don't want. There we go. Now all we need to do is start putting some stuff away and wait for the 2 hours for this to rise and make sure that it rises well. I'm going to make sure that this is nice and sealed. And so that's the end of part 1 of making bread. I will be back with you soon for part 2. I'm sorry, I know this came in actually 2 parts because I accidentally turned off the camera. But yeah, it happens. Alright, I'll see you all soon. And we'll go to step number 2. Hey everybody. Alright, so it has been resting now for an hour and a half. And so, no, 2 hours, sorry, 2 hours. So now it is time to take it from here and transfer it over into here. So this is a Pyrex container. You want to put it in something that isn't airtight. So, you know, nothing like a mason jar or something like that where you would just close off all air. Something where it's a little bit more loose, like this, is the best sort of thing to do that with. And so it is risen, and it is a big hunk of dough. See? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to transfer it over into my Pyrex dish. And then what we'll do is, after I've transferred this, you want to refrigerate it for about 3 hours. And so that's what we'll do. So boom. So there we have it. A nice mound of dough with wonderful herbs and everything like that right inside. I'll take my lid. I'm going to put this on the top of it. And then we have our dough. Now we're going to put this in the fridge for 3 hours. And again, nothing airtight. Something a little more loose fitting. And then what we're going to do is turn the timer on for 3 hours. And there we go. And we will resume in about 3 hours. So this is a long process. It takes pretty much the day. But it is so worth it. Once you have this bread, which will last for days, that just means it's even more worth it. Anyway, that's y'all. I'll see you soon. Alright, welcome back. I know it seemed like a blip of time, but it's been 3 hours. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to grab the dough out of the fridge, and I'll be right back. Alright, so our dough is set in the fridge for a good 3 hours, and that is a wonderful thing. And let's see what it looks like. I'll show you something in a second. Woo! It got big, so it's nice and big and ready to go. So what I'm going to do now is I need to cut it in half, but before I cut it in half, I need to lightly dust it with some flour. And just a light dust over the top. I'll show you how I do it. And the reason you want to do this is because it'll be easier for the knife to, a serrated knife to actually cut through the dough and not stick. It'll be easier to handle. So I'm just going to take some flour here and just lightly dust the very top of it. For where it's manageable. And I want to keep the flour out because I'm going to need to dust it again in a little while. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to take half of that and I'm going to do basically kind of a fold and roll, like over and over until it becomes like a nice smooth and round ball of dough to where it's easier to manage. So let me get started with that. But first, a serrated knife looks like this. So it's not a straight edge like this. It's going to be serrated, which just basically means it has bumps all throughout it. And then we're going to cut through this dough. So it should take just a couple of swipes to really cut through. And there we go. So I've got half of it cut now. Carefully set my knife over to the side. And I'm going to take out half of it. Spill all over the place. And then what you're going to do is, this should just only take about 30 to 60 seconds. But you're just going to kind of roll and roll and roll. And you're going to make this into a nice piece of smooth dough, which is what we want. Like I said, it should only take about 30 to 60 seconds. I want to get it as well formed as possible. And then I've already set out a long time ago a piece of parchment paper with cornmeal on it. And the cornmeal is going to keep it from sticking to the parchment paper. It also adds a nice little crust once we're done doing this entire thing. Now the rest of the dough can go in the fridge, and it can stay in the fridge up to 14 days. But now that I've got this nice and rolled out, it's a kind of a fold and roll, and you just kind of go back and forth. And it's really pretty. All the little herbs and everything that we put in there, they're all going to come through. So now that I have it nice and there's a bit of a bubble, I'll pop that thing. So I'm going to set this on the cornmeal. Once I set it on the cornmeal, I'm going to let it rest for 40 minutes. But first, what I want to do is take my Dutch oven, and this does require a Dutch oven. And this is a Dutch oven. It's very heavy. It's a big thing. But I want to put this in the oven, and then in 20 minutes, I'm going to set a timer so that in 20 minutes I will actually start to preheat the oven to 450 degrees with the Dutch oven in there, because you want it to be already hot when you put this in there. So like I said, this can be stored up to 14 days in the fridge, and you have at least one other loop. So here we go. I'm going to set this for 20 minutes. Remember, it's 40 minutes total time. But in 20 minutes, I want to preheat the oven to 450 degrees. Get that Dutch oven nice and hot, and then I will take the Dutch oven out, set it here, and move everything into the Dutch oven. But we'll go over that in just a bit. So here we go. So we're going to go 20. I'm going to hit start. I'll take the rest of this and put it in the fridge. And again, it can stay up to about 14 days before you got to make sure you use it. Okay. But anyway, I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, welcome back everybody. Okay, so the first 20 minutes have passed, and I've been letting the dough sit for a while. So it still needs to go for another 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the oven to bake at 450 degrees and hit start. And then right now what I'm going to do is set a timer again for 20 minutes. So then it'll be a full 40 minutes for this to completely rise and be ready to go in the oven. And then it'll be the final step of the cooking process. So I'll let you go for now. I'm going to set this for 20 minutes. and I'll be back for the transfer of the bread into the Dutch oven. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. Bye. Hey everybody. So we're in the final steps. So the oven is preheated to 450 degrees. And what we do next is I need to reflour this and score it. And I just want to go down, let's see, what does it say here? Well, I want to cut with the serrated knife. I want to cut down a little bit into a pattern, and then it should actually have a better time cooking, or baking. Sorry, not cooking, baking. And it'll be a lot nicer, and that's what we want. So it's a good thing for bread. That's why a lot of times when you see bread, it'll have like a pattern that looks like it's been broken, but that's actually done on purpose. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flour the dough with a bit of a sprinkle, and I don't need as much this time. And again, this is just for the knife to go in more smoothly than just going through the dough itself. And again, you want a serrated knife for this. And serrated, again, just means it'll have these bumpy parts. And this is a bread knife, and so it's one of the best things. I'm going to cut it in, I'm going to do a shape of an H. I'll let it stand for Hiller, just to be fun. But so here we go. We're going to cut through, just slice though. Slice. There's one part of the H. Slice. There's the second part of the H. And then slice. The last part of the H. And so I've got myself nicely scored dough. Now what we're going to do is the most fun, but also probably one of the more dangerous parts of this process, because the Dutch oven is going to be incredibly hot. So you need your PPE, personal protective equipment, to make sure that you don't burn yourself. I feel terrible if anybody burned themselves because of one of my cooking classes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get right here, which I have ready to go. I've got an oven glove, and I also have a hot pad. And I have hot pads here to set everything on, to make sure that everything will be alright. And I'm going to open the oven, let some of the heat come out, so that it always fogs up my glasses. Actually, this is the one time I think that I did not actually fog my glasses up. I'm going to take out the Dutch oven and set it here. But I don't want too much heat to escape from the oven. So close that immediately. And then I'm going to take the lid off of the Dutch oven. And again, set this on hot pads so that we don't burn anything or leave any marks on a counter or anything like that. You can set them right on hot pads. But now this is cooked to temperature. The Dutch oven's ready to go. Now what we need to do is transfer the dough right into here. So I'm just going to lift it up. I'm going to set it in here as smoothly as possible. And there it is. But be very careful. Again, this is very, very hot. I don't want anybody to get burned. Now I'm going to put my kitchen glove back on and just kind of push the parchment paper around to make sure that it's nicely secure in there. And then I need to put the lid back on and let this bake. So now I've got my bread in there. I'm going to put the lid back on. Now parchment paper will be just fine in the oven. It's not going to set a fire or anything like that, but you need parchment paper. That's very, very important to this process. And then what we're going to do is put this back in the oven. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to lift it up. And again, the oven's very hot, so be very careful. We're going to set it in there on the middle rack. I don't think I mentioned that before, but right about the middle of the oven, and everything will bake through evenly. And that's what we want. And then I'm going to set, 30 minutes. This is what this needs. So we're going to hit timer, or you can set it on your phone, anything you need, just to have a nice time for when it needs to come out. So 30 minutes, and it's going. And so in 30 minutes, we're going to have some beautiful bread. So I will see you in about 30 minutes once I take it out, and I will show you how to take it out safely as well from the Dutch oven. Okay, see you in a bit. Hey everybody. Okay, it is time for the unveiling of the bread. So again, make sure it's going to be very hot. Make sure that you have some personal protective equipment. You want to have a glove, a hot pad, and something in each hand. And again, it's going to be very hot as everything kind of unfolds. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take out the Dutch oven and set it on a hot pad so it doesn't burn anything. Then we'll want to turn off the oven so that things can go as they're going to go. We'll want to take off the lid, and again, please make sure that you have something to pick this lid up with because it's going to be very hot. Ooh, and that's a very pretty loaf of bread. Now what we need to do is get it out of there. And so what I've got here is a cooking spoon. Well, you want a wire rack, and so I've got a wire rack right here to have it rest on until it completely cools. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of build up around it. It's ready to get out, but you want to, again, make sure you have something on so that you don't burn yourself. I don't want anybody to burn themselves. We're going to set this on the wire rack. And look at that. That's a beautiful loaf of bread. Nice and hard. It seems cooked all the way through. Ooh, now it's being all slippery. But it looks wonderful. I can't wait to dive into it. It's going to be fantastic. And then you want to let this cool completely. And I do want to remind you all that this is pretty much an all-day process. It takes a lot of hours to make it, but it is so worth it. And again, I have another loaf in the fridge, which now I'll just have to put inside here and kind of do the end process again and have wonderful bread. Once this is done cooling, I will, cut and slice it up, and I will send you some pictures of it. But thank you for joining me for this class today. I hope that you do try to replicate this, and however you like. But it's really worth the process. So I miss you all very much, and I'm glad that you joined me today. And I'm gonna let you go. And like I said, I'll send you a picture of what it looks like, the very final product. Okay, miss ya. Bye.